Welcome to the Say Hello to Your Therapist podcast. I'm Dr. Bethany Valenti. Join me as we say hello to Anna Khandrueva, an LCSW with specialized training in marriage and family therapy. She's a trauma and relationship therapist who's passionate about helping clients heal and grow. Her practice, Courage to Heal Therapy, focuses on EMDR, IFS, hypnotherapy, and mindfulness. She especially enjoys working with people who have childhood trauma, emotional neglect, bipolar disorder, and ADHD, especially in women. Anna will be back in the future to discuss more of her specialty areas, and we're really excited, so you'll hear us make mention of that. Just a reminder, this podcast is not a substitute for any mental health advice. And don't forget to check out the show notes because we have a freebie for you today that Anna very generously provided. Today, we're going to be talking about red and green flags when it comes to working with a therapist. I do want to share that when talking about having reviews or not, I will be totally honest. As of the time of this recording, I have 0 reviews. I have some endorsements on Psychology Today, which I'm very grateful for. But like on Google, I don't have any reviews. And so just transparent about that. I also make a joke in the episode about having very kind clients who say nice things about me and how I would love it if they would put it in writing. I have never had that thought until I was told that reviews would be helpful for finding clients when moving into private practice, because I have received lovely words in writing from clients, and I actually still have several notes of my clients that I've received. They have just been de-identified, so people can't know who they are from in my house. That's a HIPAA violation. So please enjoy this episode. And if you feel like giving the podcast a review, we'll take that too. Thanks so much for joining us again. Welcome, Anna.
Hi, Beth. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you're here. I am wondering, can you share a little bit about basically how you became to be a therapist?
Sure, absolutely. I'm originally from Russia, and I came here to the US when I was 18 to go to college. And in college, I took both a psychology major and a major in business administration. And then I wanted to go into psychology straight away, but my family was like, maybe finance or accounting or something like that would be better. I shouldn't have listened, but at the time I was a young, impressionable woman. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go into the business side of things. So I worked in public accounting. I worked in finance and the mortgage industry for 12 years before deciding that it was not a good fit for me. I wanted to be a therapist. Yeah, I ended up crying in the stairwell at my job because I hated it so much.
Yeah,
So
you made it 12 years. I don't know if I would have.
It was a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's a different story for a different day, but how often we stay in situations where we're clearly miserable and because we may not see a way out or, how do I move forward? And finally, when I was in my mid-30s, I decided, no, it's time to move forward. I went to grad school for social work. I became a licensed clinical social worker after that, once I got all my hours. And now I've been working as a psychotherapist for 5 years. 5+ years.
Wow. No more crying in the stairwell?
No, it's such a refreshing view. I mean, I'm not going to say like that I always have a great day. Sometimes, as you know, our clients come in with something really heavy. And afterwards, you're like, okay, now I feel heavy. I have to do something to, as far as self-care goes. But that's nothing compared to actually hating your job. I love my job.
I love that. That's nothing compared to hating your job. Powerful stuff. You just spend so much time doing the work that you do. And if you're miserable, it's soul-sucking.
It is. If you think about it, like if you work 40 hours a week, which I know most therapists don't actually see 40 clients a week, we see like 20, 25, and then the rest is admin work. But if you work 40 hours a week and you're miserable, oh my God, that's a third of your day, 5 days a week. That's going to have an effect on your whole life.
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening who thinks we should be seeing 40 a week, I would invite you to find a therapist who can cope and live like that.
Yeah, possible.
Rough times because you would be working more because of all the other expectations that we have. And then it does take energy to talk to people. and to do it well and to provide support.
Absolutely. Like thinking back to being in finance, like you sit at your computer, but you could spend some time on your phone, go on social media a little bit, maybe read something. You're going to the water cooler, you're talking to your coworkers. You're not working, like actually doing work 40 hours a week. And I know that's not the same for everybody. There are people out there working like 50 plus hours a week and they're really actually working. But in my case, that was not the case.
Yeah, more power to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I think one of the things that would be interesting, because we were wanting to talk about red flags and green flags for finding a therapist. I mean, to me, and I talked about this with Amber, she mentioned somebody who she saw in her episode who had all the credentials, did all the things, seemed really great, but was seeing over 40 clients a week in order to make ends meet because of her being on insurance, if I remember right. And I'm guessing just trying to keep up with things. And that sort of, I think for her was a red flag because the connection wasn't there. So,
yeah, absolutely. I would agree that that's a red flag. If your therapist is seeing too many clients a week, they're just not going to have the emotional capacity for any one of those clients.
Yeah. And you focus a little bit on in some of the work that you do because you have your own audience and everything to share what to look out for with a therapist and what kind of questions to ask.
Top red flags. So before I go into specific red flags, I want to say a couple of things, if you don't mind.
Let's do it. Let's back it up. I'm excited.
Okay. So
I told you
I want to say
I'm not as regulated as I would like to be right now. So whatever groundwork you want to lay, I'm here for because my brain's not giving it right now.
Afternoon brain.
My
Familiar
afternoon
with that.
brain.
Yes. So yeah, I want to say that first, when it comes to being in session with a therapist, there is a difference between normal discomfort during therapy and then something that's a red flag.
Yes.
Because a lot of therapy, especially like if we're talking about EMDR or other therapy that really gets into your memories about past things that might be traumatic, you're going to feel not so great. You might feel challenged. You might feel stretched or emotionally raw afterwards because it's stirring up those old patterns and behaviors. That is not a red flag.
Yeah.
But if you at any point in therapy feel unsafe, dismissed, belittled, manipulated, or just you leave the therapy feeling worse about who you are, not just what you're processing and what happened to you, that would be a red flag. So I kind of just wanted to differentiate normal discomfort from a red flag.
It's a super important distinction to make as well. The way I like to put it to people is that therapy is the space where you feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love that. That is such, I think we can summarize the whole episode in that tagline. You should put it in there.
Well, I'll see if I can make that happen. I appreciate it. Yeah, but it's a very simplified way of putting it, right? Like it can be really hard for us to distinguish between that kind of discomfort versus feeling like you're being pushed in therapy, you know?
Yeah.
When we're in training, we're taught to really reflect on like what we're doing, how we might be impacting the client. And I think sometimes we get clients that are like, it's all my fault. And then there are some clients that really do look to therapists of like, you are pushing me too hard or this and that. Some are just more vocal than others. And it can be really, really hard to speak up, even within your therapeutic relationship and being honest.
Oh, yeah. And I think this is why it's important to have an episode about this, is because your therapist, whether you like it or not, is going to be in a certain position of power. And that's what they teach us in grad school. You are there as a temporary attachment figure for the client. You are serving as somebody who they see as having more knowledge, even though we guide the client, not necessarily with advice. We let them guide themselves. We just support them in it. But they definitely see you as somebody in a position of power over them. I mean, they're telling you their most raw stories and how they really feel, uncovering their emotions with you in session. So, absolutely, I feel like feeling comfortable with a therapist is so important.
Yeah, that's always really number one. And that's also just such a personal, individual thing that you'll get. But I think I've had many therapists over the years, and even ones that I didn't feel like I fully clicked with, like one was assigned to me in this clinical practice when I was in grad school. I still feel like I got something out of it, even though I wasn't sure if he was necessarily for me per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't feel unsafe. And I felt like I could speak up and that I was heard when that happened. And then I've had other therapeutic relationships that I left, one in particular, where I did not feel like I was seen or heard. And that's really meaningful.
Oh, absolutely. In general, I would like your listeners to keep this in mind that there is research showing that the quality of the relationship you have with your therapist is 7 times more important to having successful outcomes in therapy than the kind of therapy they're using.
Mm, 7 times.
7 times. Yep.
Yeah, that's not nothing. That's a
It's
lot.
not. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that in mind,
Yeah.
maybe I can tell you some things at first that kind of look like red flags when you're just in
Mm,
the stage of searching for a therapist, but
super
they
helpful. Yeah.
actually aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people might get caught up on those. And I just want them to know that that's not necessarily a red flag. So
Okay.
the first one is going to be a lack of testimonials or Google reviews there.
Mm,
A lot of people don't realize this, but we're not allowed to ask clients for reviews. It's in most states against the law, and it's definitely against our ethical code.
ethical code. Yeah. I
Yep.
was going to say ethically, but
Mhm.
also legally. Absolutely. We
Exactly.
could get in
Exactly.
big trouble. There's
So
so
if
many times
you,
I have clients who are
Mhm.
like, oh, you're so great. Blah, da, da, da. And in my head, I'm like, could you put that in writing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
But
a
I
little
can't.
asterisk.
That's,
Like, hey, if your therapist is great, please do give them a
oh,
Google review or a testimonial. That would be fantastic. They are just not
yes.
allowed to ask you for one. So as a
Mm-hmm.
result, yeah, we often hear that in session about how, like, oh my God, you've really helped me change my whole life. But then they don't go and write a Google review. So that's not a red flag. It would be kind of the opposite if you see a lot of reviews that maybe, I don't want to say it's a red flag if they come from colleagues who don't really sound like they know the person,
Mm-hmm.
because you can have colleagues who know you really well. I went to a postgraduate institute where we got to observe each other do therapy. There was like a two-way mirror, or we would do it on Zoom during COVID. And so they actually saw me doing therapy with clients live, and they can give me a really thorough review. But sometimes you might ask a colleague and they don't really know you that well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the review is pretty generic sounding, maybe it's not the best one. But yeah,
Yeah.
just in general, that lack of Google reviews is not going to be a red flag.
I even think that on the flip side, if there are several reviews and one happens to be negative or something, taking that kind of with a grain of salt, because in the work that we do, as you were sort of saying, we are not only are we not allowed to solicit reviews, we really can't say anything to people.
Yeah,
We have
you can't respond to it.
confidentiality.
Mhm.
Confidentiality is the ultimate law, so we can't respond to any review, no matter what it says.
So if you see a 1-star review for a therapist, there's even been cases that I've seen in multiple Facebook groups for therapists where somebody leaves them a negative review and it's not a client they've ever had. Maybe they're using a fake name, who knows, but on Google, that's not. And they're like, what do
Yeah.
I do? And everybody tells me you can't respond. Response you can
Mhm.
really write is I can neither deny nor confirm this person is a client.
Yeah,
That's all you can say.
absolutely. I just thinking about how we have people these days, since everything is online, sometimes reviews are a way of like kind of retaliation or hurting each other.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen that. And I've been very fortunate not to run into that personally, but I could totally see how that could be used.
Absolutely. For somebody with a lack of ethics, they could definitely do that to a colleague. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but I have a suspicion that it
Yeah.
probably does.
I'm
And
even
good,
thinking
yeah.
about
I have a family member who had somebody like not do a review on them, but contact their place of work to be like, this is who works here. And it wasn't what we're seeing a lot of now of like, this person is racist or this person, some stuff that
Mhm.
is also documentable too. It was just, hey, you should know that this person sucks kind of thing.
Oh gosh.
And so it was really problematic. And so can you imagine if someone has a business or something like that in the world with everything that's so accessible?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
And
world of
then
miscommunication.
absolutely. And then another thing that I think a lot of people think might be a red flag, but it really isn't, is if the therapist is either pre-licensed or just newly minted. They just got their license, because we do need quite a lot of hours, like thousands of hours, depending on what license you have, to become licensed. And until then, you have a supervisor who covers you with their license and provides supervision to you. So you know what you're doing. You can ask for advice from them. And then once you're newly minted, newly licensed therapist, yes, you are going to have less experience as somebody with like 5+ years of experience. But what I often have found is those pre-licensed and newly licensed therapists are so eager about new trainings, new research. They're reading everything. They're fresh out of school. So they just got all of this refreshed material, not something from 20 years ago. So you really kind of have to approach it with discernment and say, okay, does this therapist sound like they've done some new trainings and read some research recently? Or are they still parroting something from 20 years ago that we know not to be true anymore?
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Especially for certain degrees, it can be a long time before you can get licensed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I forget, are you an LPC and
I'm an LCSW.
LCSW? Okay. So sometimes the schooling is shorter for that, but then you have all of this extra training that you get before you're on your own. So they make sure, so you are really like experienced once you got that license,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, you get a lot of training and a lot of supervision before you graduate. And you might then, once you're finally graduated, get the license a little bit quicker. But really, it's really ensuring that they have enough experience on either
Yes.
side.
Yes, exactly.
It doesn't necessarily speak to the work that they do as long as it's in the mental health field. So the degrees we're looking for are
Yeah.
like psychologist. You just said what? LCSW, so
Yep.
licensed clinical
Social
social
worker.
worker.
Mhm.
LPC, so that is the licensed something
Counselor, professional
counselor.
counselor.
And there's even more. There, depending on what state you're in.
Right. You can have a licensed licensed marriage and family therapist. You can
Yes,
have a
that's what I
licensed
was
mental
thinking.
health counselor.
Yeah.
Licenses that people can have. And largely, this is maybe another thing that might look like a red flag, but isn't. Largely, it doesn't matter what kind of license they have, unless you are looking for a licensed marriage and family therapist because you have a very specific issue that would benefit from family or couples therapy. You might,
right.
but other than that, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah, that's a really good point, though. What else? Do you have any other ones that might look like red flags?
Yeah. The last one that might look like a red flag, but isn't, is not having a large web presence. Therapists are busy people, especially if they are, if they're seeing quite a lot of clients, they're staying busy with trainings. I think that at minimum, they should have a website that tells you who they are and what they do. But I know therapists,
they gotta be somewhere.
Right. Like you have to get a feel for them. They're going to have a directory entry, maybe on like Psychology Today or any number of the other directories, or have a website, because that's how you can get to know them a little bit before you even decide to give them a call for a consultation. But like not being on Instagram all the time, not being on Facebook or other type of social media, I think that's totally fine. As a matter of fact, I would say it's a rare therapist that can do all of those things at once and still pay attention to their clients and their trainings.
Yeah, and do it well.
Exactly. So if you don't see them everywhere, that's not a red flag.
It is kind of, I think, a debate for some providers of whether or not you need a website. And I think these days, because there's so much online, we're getting more and more encouragement to have a website or some sort of online presence. You're definitely not going to get found, but they may not have their own website if they're in a group practice as well.
But they should be listed under like our team, our clinician, some kind of section on the group practice website, just so you can read more about them.
And licenses are verifiable. Like you can look those up.
Absolutely. Every state has some kind of database that's online that you can just Google, like Colorado therapist license lookup, and it's going to come up. You can look them up by name and see if they actually have an active license. That is really like step number one.
Yeah.
Out.
The license part really says whether or not they can do like the clinical work. You don't necessarily have to have a license to teach. I know some people don't. Coaching does not fall under license, or it does.
That's right. Coaching does not have licenses.
We need to do an episode on coaching and what it is and what it is not, because I'm confused by it. I get it conceptually, but I'm confused by it.
There are a lot of coaches out there who unfortunately operate outside of their scope, which as a therapist, if you do that, you can get in trouble, even legally. As a coach, you really can't, which is a problem.
To be a coach, you don't need to be a mental health person. It's really just someone who's decided, I would like to help people.
That's right. And I personally have had some coaches who have been amazing. Like my Enneagram coach was super good. I would recommend her to anybody.
That's cool.
But then I've also heard of coaches who were not so good, and they started doing things more like therapy where they weren't qualified to do that.
Yeah.
So it can go either way with coaches.
That's a whole other world. Not what we're necessarily here for today, but just little something to be mindful of, right?
Put a pin in it.
Put a pin in that. Do some Googling, checking, or come back for another episode. So
back to red flags. Yes, and therapists. So
we did the ones that might look like ones, but aren't really ones. They're just flags. They're not even a color.
Yeah, they're just there. Somebody's sitting there waving them. They don't have a color. That's totally true. But when it comes to like actual red flags, one that I see quite regularly is a therapist who's going to list every possible issue as their specialty, either in the directory they're on or in their website. And they're kind of being either really generic about what they address, like just saying, like, oh, I work with anxiety and depression. Well, we all work with anxiety and depression to a certain degree, because if you have an eating disorder, you're probably going to be depressed. You have ADHD, you probably are going to be anxious. So it's like generic things that unless they tell you more about the specific population they work with, you don't really have a good idea of what they're about. And that issue of listing every possible thing as your specialty, I mean, you cannot specialize in everything.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to the word specialty. You might be able to work with some of those things, but if it goes beyond a certain level of expertise, then you really can't say it's their main specialty, which is why, for instance, Psychology Today has you pick your top 3 and everything. And so if they're just really checking all of the boxes to be able to try and cast a wide net, I could see that, being an absolute red flag.
Yeah. And one of my biggest pet peeves is therapists without specialized training on how to work with couples or families who then work with couples or families.
No. I'm terrified of that. I'm like, don't bring him to me. I do not have the expertise. I do not have the training.
I am like honestly shocked by how many therapists just get your regular license without going into any extra training for couples or families, and then see couples and families. I'm like, no, it's a very complex system. And I think you should either be a licensed marriage and family therapist, an LMFT, or if you're not, you should be able to say, okay, what are you trained in? Like, for example, I'm trained in emotionally focused therapy or EFT. I'm trained in the Gottman method. Those are the 2 main ones I use with couples. There's also PACT. There's relational therapy. Those are like the major 4, I would say. There's some others too. But without those kind of trainings, which are very intensive, they take months and some of them take years, you're really not qualified to work with a system like couples or a family.
I'm just even on a very like small scale, just picturing like, I know how to do the one person in the one room. I'm sorry, that's not true. Forget that. I love working with groups, but like that's different than working with a couple or a family.
Right.
There's so much more history there in what you're working with in terms of the systems, background.
Yeah. And there's a lot more relational stuff that goes on, that interplay between the 2 partners or family members. Because in a group, most of us had at least one class in grad school about working with groups.
Yes, at least.
But working with couples and families, unless you took like an elective or you are a licensed marriage and family therapist, which they have a separate degree for
Yes.
that, you don't really know how to do that.
Yeah. I think groups too, you are a lot more likely to get in just your training outside of classes as well. If you're doing internships and practicum, there's different words for it that different professions use. So you're more likely to get exposure and have that experience for groups more
Right.
quickly than couples.
It's a whole world of its own.
What's next? What would you say is another one?
So this one is going to be somewhat controversial because some
Oh.
therapists don't agree with me. I think it's a red flag if they don't provide a free consultation before seeing you. Just like 15, 20 minutes, you know. And the reason it's controversial is there's a lot of therapists who go, well, I don't work for free. I just charge them for the first session. But then that's not a consultation. That's just the first session. And it's much harder then for the person to say that wasn't a good fit than rather just meet for 15 minutes online over Zoom, see if you're a good fit. Because remember, that fit is 7 times more important than what they're actually doing in the room with you. So my opinion on that is how can you possibly know you're a good fit if you don't spend that 15 minutes just talking and getting to know one another and kind of getting a feel for it?
I fully agree. I have no notes, nothing to say. Agreed. You need to be able to talk to the person.
Yeah. Because, like, if their only criteria of fit with you is whether they take your insurance, that's not enough. I know that a lot of people are limited of what their insurance offers as far as like what therapists they can work with. But you should be able to say, okay, great, you take my insurance. Let's talk further. Let me interview you because let me make it clear that 15-minute consultation is you, the client, interviewing the therapist. They're going to ask you questions to find out more about what you want to work on and what you're looking for, but see it as like they're trying to get a job with you.
Yeah. I also think back to whether or not they may have much of an online presence. So this might really be the first exposure that you could get to them. If they do have a lot of presence and you feel like you have a vibe of them and you could just schedule with them, more power to you. You know, like if you
Right.
feel that comfortable and you feel like if something was off, you could step out of that comfortably, safely, whatever, then by all means. But oftentimes you still kind of want to make sure that they can respond to you in the way that you need.
Absolutely.
For me as well, we're making sure in the consultation that we're on the same page about not just like what's going on, if we're a good fit, but also before I'm getting off the phone, we have a discussion about finances. Like, I need you to hear me say my fee or for
Right.
us to figure out like the insurance situation to make sure you know what you're consenting to. So unless it's somebody who really is just actually had somebody who reached out to me and I said, "Okay, well, normally I'd do a call," and they just wanted to schedule with me. And I said, "Okay." So I put all the crucial stuff in an
In the
email
email.
and was willing. The only reason I would see it as not a red flag if they're not doing that is that they're just saying, "I'll do the first appointment with you," and then we're using that kind of like a consult. And I know that some therapists will do that. I've only really heard of one who says that they'll do it that way. And that's just making sure they're getting paid, you know, that they don't work
Yeah.
for free. If that works for their practice, then more power to them. And if that was how they were managing it, it would be more meaningful to me that they had an online presence potentially and that they handled that first appointment really well.
They have to make it clear to the client that it's okay to say no to working with them in the future if it's not a good fit.
Yes. The other point that I want to make is that their fee should also be listed online so you know what you're getting into for that first
Absolutely.
appointment. Even if I'm not signing on for long term, I know I'm at least paying. Like all that stuff is up front and you're doing all your paperwork up front
Right.
so you're able to read through all the disclaimers or whatever notes that they have.
100% agree with you.
What other flags come to
What
mind?
else? Okay. So say you're doing that consultation or first session and they give you some kind of a guarantee of, oh, this is going to take 10 sessions and then you'll be fine. Or we can work together for 6 months and then you should, like, any kind of guarantee about length of treatment and what kind of results you're going to get. Again, for most of us, it's unlawful to do that. And at the very least, it's unethical to give a guarantee.
Yeah. And that is different than saying, this is how long I usually work with people, or like I tend to do EMDR for this many sessions, like that's the protocol, but blah, blah, blah. If they're saying, no, absolutely, you will have X, Y, and Z in this number of sessions, that would be a red flag for sure.
Right, right. Because they should, like, if you ask them, hey, can you give me an example of results that a client that's similar to me has gotten? That's a great question to ask because they should be able to do that without breaking confidentiality. That's like things to watch out for. If they start talking in detail about a client, that's not good. But they should be able to give you a general sense of, okay, I did work with a client, let's say with an eating disorder, and they saw improvement within probably 8 months, and they still needed to do a lot of work on their trauma afterwards, but their eating disorder did improve after about 8 months. I cannot guarantee that for you, but that's what happened for that client. Something
Right.
like that.
Absolutely. And like improve is relative. That's individual to the
Very
person.
Yep.
They started feeling more comfortable with this. They were able to do, some sort of example of how an outcome shifted.
Exactly. You're hitting the nail on the head. And then another red flag is that can appear both in consultation or during the first few sessions, or really any session, I would say, is if they don't explain what they're doing, like they don't explain their methods or what they're trying to do with you, because that's part of being trauma informed, was kind of having that clarity about, okay, this is the kind of therapy I use. This is what it looks like. This is what you can expect during a typical session of, let's say, EMDR or brain spotting. And then in session, have you ever had a doctor, for example, who just goes to touch you somewhere without telling you they're going to touch you? For a lot of people, that's a big deal.
Just doing things.
Right, exactly.
Oh,
like that is
right,
not trauma informed.
Guess the touching portion of the exam has started.
Yep. And I did not give you a heads up. That does not feel good. Even to a person without trauma and to a person with a history of trauma, that can be downright triggering.
I think it's really meaningful when you have someone that you work with that is at bare minimum informing you, or just like, here's what I'm thinking, or let me give you a heads up about what I'm about to do. Or checking in, even if, I'm super client centered. So I'm usually just sort of like, what do you think? A lot of the time.
In that leads us to our next red flag, which is making the session about themselves and giving you way too much self-disclosure.
Right. And okay, so what's the line for that? Because some therapeutic orientations, like some approaches, do encourage self-disclosure. So how do we know that it's like, I think usually clients that I've worked with who have come in and been able to say like, oh, this person was just really always talking about their kids, or there's sort of a line with self-disclosure that feels like beyond what would be helpful or normal.
Yeah.
I do know that the longer I work with some clients, it doesn't even take that long. They do like having more of a back and forth in the relationship. So they do want to see pictures of my kids. They don't mind that a cat is crawling all over me.
That humanizes you, right? Because there's a different kind of self-disclosure. Like if you're just kind of building that therapeutic connection and relationship, and you're talking about, oh yeah, your kids are in college, so are mine. That's one thing. But if your client comes to you and they just went through a divorce and they need to talk about it, and they're like, oh, I went through the same thing, let me tell you all about it. That's the kind of stuff.
Usually when I'm self-disclosing, I'll say, sometimes I'll be like, do you want to know? Or I'll ask, or sometimes I'll start and I would guess that it would be observable for me to like, that I slow down a little bit because I'm thinking about how much I want to share. Or I'll say, I'm sharing because this is how I feel like it connects back. There's usually reasons for me to do that.
Yes, you have to be very intentional about it. And in general, like the rule of thumb is if you're self-disclosing because it's benefiting your client in some way, then that should be okay as long as you keep it relatively short and don't go into like 20 minutes of self-disclosure. If you're doing it to kind of help yourself, then that's not okay.
Yeah, I think, and it's an individual person. Like someone might really appreciate that they're working with someone who's also been through a divorce.
Right.
That could be really helpful. One of the things I self-disclose about a ton with all of my grief clients is that I have lost both of my parents and other relatives at different times of my life. And I usually just am able to keep it at that. And that tends to be enough. And then if something comes up later, they'll be able to tell because I'll say, oh yeah, how about blah, 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 and they're like,
Absolutely,
yes.
yeah.
And so there really doesn't need to be that much in order to connect. You also sometimes, like you said, humanizing is so meaningful that contributes to the relationship. If a client comes in and they are also super into, I don't know, I just saw a trailer or some sort of,
Star Wars is a great example of that.
Yeah.
I like Star Wars. If I have a fellow, and I'm going to use that word very positively, a fellow nerd come in.
Oh,
I'm like,
yes. I use nerd.
hell yeah. And
only
talk about
positive.
Star Wars to connect. And then we can talk about trauma. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Stranger Things just came out with a trailer. Like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting. Yeah. Self-disclosure is meaningful. We want to feel like we can connect with people. But once it goes beyond and you're just like, huh. So if you're starting to ask yourself, what's the point of this? Or I thought we were here for me. That's kind of note,
Absolutely.
But if you're someone who thinks that a therapist should not be sharing, there's a therapist out there for you. And if you want it to be about you the whole time, then that's totally fine.
Right. In grad school, for a lot of people, depending on the theoretical orientation they're going for, but for a lot of people, they will teach you how to be what we call a blank slate. Meaning you don't self-disclose. The client is the only focus of the appointment. You are kind of just there as a blank slate, reflecting what they're saying, etc. And that only works to a certain degree because then you come off as a robot, and you don't want to do that.
I think we need to have some practice being a blank slate because then we really learn how to listen more effectively. We learn very quickly about if you don't know this coming into grad school, it's a very helpful tool to be like, don't give them anything. You're here to be there for them. So it's very meaningful to practice, but it can hurt the relationship if you totally withdraw and erase yourself as a human from the room.
Right. You shouldn't do that. Absolutely.
I know for a fact that I have clients that really like it when I'm like, what the fuck? If I have a very genuine reaction to what they're talking about, that's validating. And so because I've had that positive reaction, I've really allowed that to come through more. People can tell when you're being fake.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a reason there's that stereotype of a therapist just continually asking, and how does that make you feel? Right? If you do that over and over again, you're going to come off as somebody who's not genuine.
Yeah. I haven't seen the sequel, but the original Freaky Friday. Okay, excuse me. The remake Freaky Friday. So I have not seen the original Freaky Friday. I've not seen the newest Freaky Friday, but the one that was remaking the original with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. When they switch, Jamie Lee Curtis plays a therapist in that film, and they switch. So she's like, you have to go to work because it's a movie. And in any other reality, we would be like, we're calling into
Yes.
I don't think I'm going to ethically be okay with sending my teenage daughter to be a therapist. I think that teenage daughter could pretend to be a therapist, calling their client over and over again to reschedule or cancel for the week.
Yeah.
But there's a scene where she's like telling her, like, when you go, all you have to do is like, whatever they say, just say nod. And then how do you feel about that? And they show her actually doing it. And it's so funny to see where it's effective and where it's not. Actually, it's kind of fun. Every now and then I wonder if a client's going to look at me and be like, you really just pulled that one out, But like, how does that make you feel? I want to know. This is information that we still need to know. But if that's all you're doing, that's not what
that's
we're here
a red
for.
flag. Yes, absolutely.
If you are with a therapist that is acting like Jamie Lee Curtis from the body switching scene in Freaky Friday, then that's a problem.
Yeah, and like as you can see, like some of these red flags are going to be nuanced, right? And another one is like if your therapist gives you direct advice rather than letting you decide what you want to do and reflecting on your emotions and stuff. For example, let's say you're talking about your boyfriend and you're not sure if he's a good fit for you, and they just go, oh, you should just break up with him.
You got friends that'll say that to you. You didn't come to therapy for that advice. That's a friend statement.
Not a therapist.
And even then, plenty of my clients have issue with that being the friend statement because they don't want to necessarily just dump them. It takes a long time to dump them sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There might be any number of reasons why that's
Yeah.
not appropriate right now. And a therapist should help you explore that situation in your life, explore your needs, your emotions, your fears about it. And they might go as close as they should come to giving you direct advice, in my opinion, is kind of like posing the question as, well, I wonder, what would it be like if you didn't have this person in your life? What would your life look like? Because that's exploring it. That's not giving direct advice.
Yeah. Or what do you get out of this relationship? I think is one that I've asked.
That's a great one.
Do you feel like you're getting your needs met?
Yeah, I had a client who came to me once, and she said that during the first phone consultation with a potential therapist, the client started talking about how she was struggling with a husband who was drinking too much. And the therapist on that first consultation went, "Oh, honey, he's never going to change. You should just dump him."
That sounds like something a mother-in-law or your mom or somebody would say. Again, a friend statement. Oh.
Exactly. Or somebody who has their own baggage regarding that topic.
In the first interaction
in the first interaction.
In the free consultation.
Yes.
Giving advice in the free consultation.
And even the client recognized that it's being inappropriate. That's why she told me the story.
Yeah, she's like, get a load of this, Anna.
Exactly. Yeah. And then like another red flag is you have some therapists who tend to pathologize everything.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily going to do that to the client's face about the client, although they might, and that would be a big, but like, let's say you're telling them a story about your father and they're like, oh, well, he's clearly a narcissist, or your mother's clearly borderline. Like making sweeping generalizations like that, the father might be a narcissist and the mother might have borderline personality disorder, but they don't know that. Again, it's about exploring that, thinking, what does the client think about that? Do they think their father is a narcissist? Well, let's explore that.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, no, I fully agree with that.
Right. And then the last one that I can come up with that's going to be a big red flag, even though I'm sure there are many more, is if they don't have good boundaries. And what I mean by that is could be really in a number of things. But for example, they might text you really late in the evening. They might ask you to hang out socially, which is a big no-no, or like add you as a friend on social media. Big no-no. We're not supposed to do that. Don't ever like ask your therapist to add you as a friend. And if they add you first, that's a big red flag. Maybe they're like, especially like I actually have had a client that had happened to a therapist. So the client lost a bit of weight and she had trouble like with her body image. And the therapist said, oh, you look so nice. You lost so much weight. Can seem innocuous, but to that client, it really cut deep, and it gave her the message of you should lose weight.
Yeah, it reinforces that.
Yeah, so those boundaries, like if they are too flexible with their schedule and they're like, you know what, normally I don't see people on the weekend, but I'll see you this weekend. It could be okay if you're in a crisis, absolutely, but it could also be because they don't have good boundaries and they need to model those boundaries to you, the client, so that you know it's not okay to text your therapist at night. You know it's not okay to expect them to give you a free session out of nowhere.
Let's talk about green flags.
Greens.
Do you have any green flags?
I do. It would be unfair to us therapists if I just gave you red flags without giving you some green flags.
Agreed.
Yeah. So the one, and some of them are going to be kind of similar to the red flags, but the opposite. So I'm trying to minimize those and just give you some of the ones that aren't that. Fair. But the first one we really need to talk about is they stay within their scope of practice. Their scope of practice is important. For example, like I don't specialize in eating disorders. So if somebody comes to me with an eating disorder, I'm going to refer them out. And that's a good green flag if this therapist, either during a consultation or during the first few sessions, goes, you know what? I don't actually think I'm the right person to help you. Let me give you some names of people who might be a better fit for you.
Yeah. Or even just making note of like, just so you know, this is not my area of specialty. I say that a lot. I'll say I'm speaking outside of my wheelhouse and we would want to consult or all that kind of stuff.
Right, because they might want to work with you for a different reason, even if you don't specialize in what they need to treat. I know Colorado is a pretty white state. There's not a lot of diversity, especially in therapists. So let's say if you're Black and you find a Black therapist, you might want to work with them because they're going to know what it's like for you to go through experiences of racism and oppression and
Yeah.
microaggressions and all of that. And that might be more important to you than the specific issue you want to work on.
That's such a good point. What other green flags?
So another one, we kind of touched on this already, but they should be able to explain their approach clearly and give you examples of some results their clients were able to achieve and what you can expect. Not a guarantee, but like, for example, I use EMDR, which can help process trauma with bilateral stimulation. So you would say, here's what that looks like in a session. Here's an example of what you might feel like after a session, because with the MDR, it's not always positive. So just explaining what they're doing, it's a part of being trauma informed, telling you what they're about to do in session, if they're trying something new with you. Then another one is they should be somebody who welcomes questions and feedback from you. Yeah, like questions at any point in time during the consultation, during your sessions. If the client has a question like, why are we doing this? And how is this helpful to me? They should be able to give you a reason. And then feedback, like I often ask clients at the end of the session, I kind of do check-ins and say, how's therapy going for you so far? What notes do you have for me? It should be client-led, not just therapist-led. Like, yes, sometimes they come to you and they say, please take my hand and take me on this journey.
Yes. Sometimes they do. They're like, I'm just along for the ride. You just tell me. And then some really want to have a voice in what they're doing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then your therapist should, it's to go against that red flag of pathologizing everything. They should be able to validate you instead of labeling like what you've been through or who you might be or who your family members might be, so saying something like, given what you've been through, that reaction makes a lot of sense. They're not necessarily approving of the fact that you spilled coffee on purpose on your coworker, but they're saying, you know what, knowing what I know about you and your coworker, that makes sense. So do you want to work on that? Do that in the future?
Yeah. Would you in the future rather just spill the coffee, but not on the person? Like what sort of progress are we just even trying to be able to use our words, or are we trying to just be able to get up and walk out of the room? What would you like to be able to do?
Exactly.
These are really good. I've even just thinking about some green flags like we were talking about of just like having them be human and letting them see you be human. I think that we get a lot of expectations for therapists to be kind of superhuman and like put together like all the time.
Yeah.
And that's just not really fair. But it also is just not a reality. Like the human beings that we are can't be perfect 100% of the time. And a lot of the time, I had a supervisor that was like, that was really meaningful to me when they said, like, they kind of need to see you be human so that they have permission to give themselves that grace.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of spilling coffee, there is a study where they were measuring likability of people, like strangers, and they basically had this person who would answer like trivia questions. And they had two conditions where one was he would answer all the trivia questions correct and in general, like appeared really competent and put together. And the second one was where he did the same thing. He answered everything correctly. But this time when he stood up, he spilled coffee on himself and was like, oh, silly me, look at me. I'm a silly goose. And they found that the likability drastically increased for that scenario where the person appeared competent, but then they did something that showed that they were human.
I love that. So true.
Yeah, I use that example often when I work with social anxiety. I'm like, nobody expects you to be perfect.
Yeah.
They will like you less if you are.
Yeah. I think that's a reality. And if they are expecting you to be perfect, then depending on the relationship that you have with them, then that's kind of different,
Exactly.
If it's a friend expecting perfection, if it's your boss expecting perfection, if it's your partner expecting perfection, like there's a lot of nuance there to what's appropriate and what is feasible. Is it perfection or is it just a lot?
Exactly. And then I've got 3 more green flags for you.
Okay. Let's go.
So one is they continue their own education beyond the minimum that's required to maintain their license.
Okay. That is a green flag.
Yeah, for sure.
I will take that green flag.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with training.
Yes.
Myself,
hand it right over.
Yeah, the requirements might be that you take 20 continuing education hours every 2 years. In my opinion, that's not enough. Just by the nature of being a curious clinician and wanting to learn more to serve your population, you're going to rack up more than those 20 hours every 2 years. So I think it's a big green flag when they do continue their own education. And it's okay to ask, hey, how have you stayed updated on this topic? Have you taken any recent trainings about complex trauma or eating disorders or whatever it is that you want to work on?
Okay. But 2 more.
So the next one is they really should acknowledge culture, identity, like that kind of context in your work together. If they're never curious, like especially if you have a different cultural identity, you come from a different ethnic background or a different culture within the same country, right? Maybe you have different skin color, you have a different ethnicity, you have different gender, you have a different sexual orientation, whatever. If they never ask you with a curious tone of, hey, how has your cultural background affected the way you see this? Has it resulted in any trauma for you that was just purely cultural based? Questions like that they can ask during intake and they can ask later in sessions, I think are very important questions to ask.
Absolutely. They need to see your whole self because, again, we were talking about context and what our impression of what typical is might vary.
Absolutely. It's just the reality of life, especially in the United States, that an experience for a white cisgender straight person is not going to be the same as for somebody who doesn't share those identities.
One of the first things that's coming to mind, which is kind of like small potatoes, but like if you were working with a mom from Russia, tell me about if I'm correct about this. But like one of the things that I didn't know about until I became a parent was something called elimination communication and just like how much more quickly other cultures, including like for instance Russia, have their kids like potty trained by age 1. And so if you have someone whose parents are from Russia and they're trying to raise like, a kid and their grandparents are having a lot to say about that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just like whether or not that's just an example. You know what I mean? Of like, oh, like if you were just like, well, that's just ridiculous. How could they expect this child to? It's just like, I mean, not necessarily.
It's just the therapist has to stay curious rather than make assumptions, judgments, anything like that. They just need to stay curious about what was it like for you.
We have one more.
This one is, I think, a really important one because despite all of what we've talked about today, right? And we kind of touched on the therapist is not going to be perfect, but a therapist might make a mistake with you. And we call it a rupture, right? They might say something that doesn't sit right with you. They might challenge you in a way that's a bit too much. They might say something that's culturally insensitive without realizing it. So a good therapist is going to repair that rupture. They're going to, first of all, notice that it happened. So maybe they will say something like, I noticed that you just got quiet after I made that comment. Can you tell me more about that? I may have missed something there. So they will admit when they're wrong. They will be the ones to initiate that repair and offer some kind of a bridge from that rupture to like, hey, we can still work together. I'm really sorry about making that mistake. I will make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And if they don't catch it themselves, if you tell them like, hey, I was really uncomfortable with you pushing me in this way, for them to be able to say, okay, like I hear you. How can I be more mindful of that in the future?
Absolutely. Yes, that's it.
I know that we're going to have you back in the future. So I will just keep us to this and I will be caffeinated and all sorts of stuff when that happens. And so we'll talk about wonderful things in the future. So are you up for switching to our wrap up questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Where are you licensed?
I am licensed in the state of Colorado, so I can see anybody who's located in Colorado.
And do you currently have openings?
I do have a few openings. I'm very selective about who I take into my practice because it's going to be better for the client if it's a good fit. Do the consultations, I make sure it's a good fit. So yes, I do have a few openings.
Okay, great. How would you describe your theoretical orientation?
That's another really good question. I am very attachment and relationship based. Again, I think that building that relationship with the client is really important. And if the therapist has to serve as a temporary attachment figure because the client never had anybody be a positive role model in their lives, then so be it. We just need to make sure it's not permanent and that the client is able to then fly on their own. So my theoretical orientation, like when it comes to EMDR and parts work, a lot of it is believing that we are not just a monolith of a person. We have all kinds of parts that may be different emotions within us, different thoughts, never really pathologizing any one of them, recognizing that all of those parts have something good for you intention wise. They just may have a terrible execution of that intention. And then how do we work with those parts in order to negotiate a better way of working together rather than telling the part, no, you're wrong, go away, I don't want you here. So really
Bad all the time.
Right. It's really about helping the person deepen their relationship with themselves and have more harmony, inner harmony. So it's not necessarily a theoretical orientation because I don't necessarily do just psychodynamic or just things like that. But that's generally how I see my clients and what I want to help them do.
Yeah, that's great. Do you take insurance?
I do not take insurance.
What's your current fee?
My current fee is $200 for a session that lasts generally about 15 minutes.
Okay. And are you online or in person?
I do online therapy with anybody who's located in Colorado, and my office in person is in Broomfield, Colorado.
Awesome. What do you nerd out about?
Oh gosh, professionally or personally?
Oh, I'll let you decide.
Let's talk personally because we talked about professional.
I was going to say
time.
personal, but I also knew again, we'll have you back.
Okay, so personally, I love horror movies and I love knitting.
Oh,
right.
wow.
One is like, oh my God, you watch horror movies. The other one's like, oh, nice, how comfy, knitting.
You knit while watching horror movies?
I knit while watching horror movies. I love it. It's like literally what I do to relax all the time. I've seen every single good or bad horror movie that's available on like the 3 major streaming platforms. And when a new one comes out, like I just watched The Good Boy the other day, I'm so excited. I'm like, okay, I can't wait to see this.
It's called A Good Boy?
It's called Good Boy. And it's about a horror movie from the point of view of a dog.
I saw the trailer for that like months ago. I forgot about that one. It looks not for me, but very good.
Yeah, it was original.
That's original.
Very original.
The little blurbs that were coming up in the ad for it, like just celebrating the dog's acting, just like were just great. Like that alone would be enough.
It is incredible. I don't know if they used AI because if they didn't, that dog is a good actor.
Was it good?
Good, in my opinion. Bit maybe predictable towards the end, but still good enough that I would definitely recommend it. I was knitting a beautiful scarf while doing it. So it was just so enjoyable.
A good time. Because I think if part of the reason that one's not for me is because it's more supernatural, correct?
Yes.
It's like, yeah. I'm glad you like that. And I'm glad to know that it's good. I can read about it or we can chat about it, but I probably couldn't watch it.
No, I hear you. Like personally, I don't like horror movies where the perpetrator is human. So like a slasher or like somebody who does a home invasion and then terrorizes the family. I hate those. I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want anything real that could potentially happen to me or somebody I care about. I don't want to watch that. But
even you got your limits.
Stuff. I have my limits for sure. Supernatural stuff I love. It's just, I like the stories. Sometimes the acting is terrible and that makes it good.
Makes it more entertaining.
Yeah.
See, then you wouldn't want to watch this one. I just thought about the one with Hugh Grant that came out a while back. I was just going to be curious if you liked that one.
What it's called, but yes, it was a human perpetrator, so I didn't watch it.
So you didn't watch it. Okay. See, there's somewhere I want to be like, how is this one? How is this one? Okay, but let me ask you about this one. What about Oh, what's it called? They just came out with a sequel. Is it called Black Phone or something like that? It's the one with
Yes.
like Ethan
Yes.
Hawke. They just came out with the sequel, and that one was clear. Like they were like there's a overlap. There's like an intersect between real and like supernatural in that.
Right. Right. I
Is that
haven't seen
something you'll
Black
do?
Phone 2 yet, but I
Okay.
would, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
If there's a
Yeah.
supernatural element, and
Did
I
you see
mean,
the first one?
I did see the first one and I
Okay.
enjoyed it. Yeah.
Enjoyed it.
I am a therapist. So, of course, I like movies where there's an intersection of horror and trauma. So, like,
Yeah.
Smile was a good one. Oculus is an excellent horror movie where they definitely deal with family trauma.
Is that the one with the mirror thing?
Yes,
Oculus is
the one with the mirror. And it's kind of the way it's presented is like, is it a supernatural mirror or is it something happening within the family that's like being abusive or whatever? So
fascinating.
without spoiling anything,
Yeah.
that's where I will leave that.
Yeah. You probably like Babbadook then, don't you?
I love Babbadook. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, you
That's
really like
another
Babbadook.
really good
Yeah.
intersection of.
Yeah, those are good ones. Not that I've seen it, but like I told you, I'll sometimes sit and read like the descriptions, like
Yeah,
IMDb, like
I
the
totally hear
description.
you.
Yeah.
My husband hates them because he doesn't like jump scares. Not because he gets scared, because if I like jump and scream, then he was like, oh my God.
So
He
you
doesn't
still
like
jump?
them.
I'm very jumpy, like, and that's partly
It
like why
depends.
the stuff that jumps out, I can't.
Yeah, it depends. Because like when you watch a lot of horror movies, you get used to like, oh, the music is swelling. There's going to be a
Yeah,
jump scare.
something's
So
coming.
some
Yeah,
movies are really good about not being like cliche and you don't know what to expect. Those I still do get scared. I
yeah.
might still jump. But there's even a website called where'sthejumpscare.com where it will tell you with timestamps what to expect in each movie. So if you are somebody who's jumpy, you can know what, like, you can still watch a movie and be like, okay, it's coming. Get ready.
Yeah, just if you can't tell from the music, it's coming. Yeah, I could talk to you about that for a while. Just because I don't watch them, I then like to talk to people who do and be like, okay, so what happened to this movie? So I don't have to like watch.
Yeah, yeah.
And what were your thoughts?
Yeah, my theory about horror movies is if you have a client who's like really, like if you look at that window of tolerance and they're really below their window of tolerance and they're really depressed, numb, dissociated, not interested in anything, I sometimes will recommend, if it's within something they want to do, I will recommend, like, have you thought about watching a horror movie with like a good jump scare? Because that might rev their nervous system into more of a fight or flight response. And if you're familiar with polyvagal theory, that's how you get to a better place. You have to go through that fight or flight briefly to get to a place of like calm and peace and social engagement. So I have definitely recommended it to clients.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, there was one other thing. It's gone because you made that point and I thought it was so interesting, but then I also lost mine. So that's okay. Do you have any pets?
I do. I have 2 dogs. They are both so adorable. Love them so much. Hazel and Sunny. One is a Jack Russell Terrier and Italian Greyhound combination. She looks very, very beautiful. And the other one is a Jack Russell Terrier and a Dachshund, which she's a little clumsy and maybe not as beautiful. In my opinion, she is.
So cute.
And now it's time she might be a bit more of a stumpy little legs, but she's adorable. I love so
stumpy
much.
Little legs.
Oh, they're so cute.
I forgot we both have a Sunny.
Oh, that's right.
But we spell them different, I think. So what's something that you find comforting?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, knitting would definitely be something that's comforting for me. I find it to be very calming and meditative, especially if you find a pattern where there's like an easy repeat. So it's not too easy that you get bored and it's not too challenging that you have to keep checking your notes for the pattern. That's the sweet spot for me. And I really love spending time with my husband. And maybe that's lame, but we sit down together. We do conversation cards. If we can come up with a topic on our own, we call it ticket time after Malcolm in the Middle. So we just will sit there and have endless conversations. We've been married for almost 10 years and we don't get bored.
I love that. Malcolm in the Middle is having a reboot.
They are. And we're very excited because we watch that show like every night before going to bed to settle down. We'll watch Malcolm in the Middle.
Yay, that's so great. And I just had my thought. It came back. I was just going to say that I actually saw an article come up that an expert was talking about why people like horror movies and about how it actually makes them feel better about their lives.
Yeah, that's true.
It was like, whatever I have going on, it's a form of escape that at least somebody in this world has it worse than I do.
At least my house is not haunted.
Yes. Do you do coffee or tea?
Coffee.
And what is your least favorite misconception about mental health work?
I'm going to steal what we talked about today, and I'm going to say it's the misconception that therapists are supposed to be perfect and not have, like, any of their own issues.
Yeah.
Because I think the idea is that we keep working on our issues and we're self-aware enough to know we have issues and that we need support, not that we are perfect humans who don't have any issues.
Absolutely. So, Anna, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? You have your own podcast that people could listen to.
Yes, I do. So the best place to find me would be my website, and it's couragetohealtherapy.com. You can put it in your show notes. And on there, people can find my podcast. My podcast is called Courage to Heal, just like my practice. So you can find it in all the places where you listen to podcasts. And I talk about mental health. I stay away from just saying I talk about one thing because I like to diversify it and talk about all things mental health. So you can really find, some episodes it's interviews, some it's just me talking.
I was going to make a joke that was too broad and that was a red flag.
Good one. Yes, good one.
It's not a podcast red flag. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, because I do love some podcasts that are really focused on one issue. I think they can go really in depth about it. I did do like the first 10 episodes are all about bipolar disorder because that's my specialty. That's something I live with. So that's really near and dear to my heart. So if you live with that, definitely listen to the first 10 episodes. You'll learn a whole bunch of things and just hear interviews with people who have that as a lived experience. But other than that, just check out my website. And then for your listeners too, I would love to give them a guide on how to find a great therapist, because I think that goes really well with what we talked about today. And that guide is totally free. They just have to sign up with their email. I'll give you the link. In that guide, they have a list of every possible directory under the sun, because I think everybody knows about psychology today, but there's a lot more that people can check out. Some that are focused on a specific identity of the client. Like there's therapy for Black girls, queer therapy. There's all kinds of specialized directories.
Fantastic. I'm going to need this resource. I'm going to go put my email so I can get this freebie, Anna.
You know what? I don't have the link off the top of my head.
Okay. Is it on your website?
That one is not directly on my website. So I'll give you a link for that. Okay. And it has questions you can ask during that consultation with a potential therapist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anna Khandrueva. Is that right? Khandrueva?
Yes, you nailed it.
Anna Khandrueva. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I really can't wait to return and talk to you again.
Same.